Good morning. Welcome to those of you here in the sanctuary, to those of you on Zoom and on Facebook, and to those of you who perhaps are watching this later in the week. I want to make a special welcome to our newcomers and visitors and to let you know you are so welcome here. I want you to know that we now have a welcoming table in the social hall after the service where you can learn more about us, or if you are ready to join, sign the membership book each week. If you've been coming for a while and thinking about joining, we welcome you to do so any Sunday at this membership table. And we will be formally welcoming new visitors at a ceremony in late November. So if you've been thinking about it, this is a good time to join. Today is our recognition of All Souls Day, which will take place for our Christian neighbors on Wednesday, November 2nd. Because I won't be with you next weekend, and because of the important election coming up on November 8th, we decided to recognize All Souls Day today. I know this is an important tradition here at the fellowship to honor people who have died in the past year. We're going to be expanding the service this morning, though, to talk about our ancestors here in the fellowship as well as in our lives. Many of you brought photos placed on this table in front of us, and I invite you to think that the spirit of those we loved and our memories will surround us this morning. I'd also like to take a moment before we begin the service to thank Peggy Coulias, Anne Monnier, and Leslie Speed, who co-chair our memorial committee, and all of you who volunteer either in the memorial garden or with our memorial services. You help us honor our ancestors. Our opening words this morning are from my colleague, the Reverend Kathleen McTeague. They are with us still. in the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us. It is right to remember the names who give us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before them. They were drawn by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustices before us, have not melted into the dust. They have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and their love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them, we choose the deeper path of living. May you be blessed by the memories of those who came before you. If you will now stand in body or in spirit and join our voices in singing Sweet Honey and the Rock song, We Are. The words will be on the screen.
Good morning. My name is Karen Mazzata, and my pronouns are her and she. Lila, will you join us this morning to help us light the chalice? As I read these words, in memory of all the flames by Amaret Calloway. In memory of all the flames that didn't die, in the midst of darkness, in spite of the darkness, we light this flame today. Thank you. Awesome. We have a few announcements this morning. The UUFH Board of Trustees, based on recommendations from our reopening task force, would like to announce the newest COVID guidelines for Sunday services. This will begin November 6th. That's 2 weeks from today. We are no longer requiring service attendees to be fully vaccinated. The board asks that you continue to wear a well-fitted mask when attending service. Masks will continue to be optional during our social hour after the service. This means a mask is suggested in the social hall, but may be removed outside on the Sam Phillips patio where we can enjoy coffee, food, and conversation. The reopening task force continues to follow the current data on the variants, and our guidelines can change if gathering is deemed unsafe. This new policy will be posted in our flash and on our website. So please take a look if you need additional clarification, and we appreciate everyone's cooperation. The Pumpkin Queens have asked are grateful for everybody's participation, and we have enough sellers through the duration of the month. What they do need is Sunday, October 30th, after the service, a group of strong hands to start taking down the pumpkin patch. It will run through October 31st, but it's the beginning of the breakdown then. And if you can remember to come next week, that would be awesome. You can sign up in the social hall if you can help on Sunday about 12:30 or Monday at 3 o'clock or both. A Zoom event will be this Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. We are Proud Boys, how a right-wing street gang ushered in a new era of American extremism. And Wednesday in our own social hall, Julie Owens, president of Gender Equality New York, will be joining us for a special presentation available to answer all your questions about gender and gender equality. And it's an important program for the fellowship, so we're hoping as many people as possible will be able to join. There's a flyer in the social hall for additional information. All of this is also in this week's flash and on the website. Thank you. So please join me now in saying our mission statement. The words are on the screen. We're singing it. All right, sorry. Go, Jay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Danielle Burby. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at UUFH. And I would love to invite the children and youth up because we're going to be talking about this table of ancestors. Come on up. All right, so how many of you brought a picture in today of one of your ancestors? Ellie, you did. Yeah, let's see. This is my grandma and grandpa. You can see they're happy, they're dancing. So one way that I love to honor my ancestors is to just think about them when I'm reminded of them. And in that way, I have a little bit of a conversation with them going on in my head. So even though they're not here, they're here in my heart. So my grandma loved to read. She just read and read and read book after book after book. She went through books so quickly. And I don't know if you know, but my dad teaches literature. And I actually have another job that I do where I work in book publishing. So my grandma passed her love of reading on to my dad, who passed it on to me. And my grandpa loved nature, and he knew every single bird in the entire world. He could tell you any bird. So whenever I recognize a bird, I think about my grandpa. And so those are just two different ways that I honor my ancestors. So I would love to invite you guys to tell me what you think about the people who you brought here, or who, if you didn't bring a picture, someone in your life who died, who you have thoughts about. If you would like to share, Millie, go ahead.
My great-great-grandmother was named Millie, and whenever I think of my name, I think of her, and I really love her. Meet her.
Thank you for sharing that, Millie.
I brought a picture of my great-grandma, and I was named after her.
That's so beautiful. Does anyone else want to share? Yeah? Okay, go ahead.
So when it's a dog named Walt, but he doesn't know anything, and he ran outside on the front yard, and then he died.
And you think about him, and you think about the fun times you had together, right? You have a picture of the dog at home. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else want to share something? Yeah, go ahead.
I never met my grandpa on my mom's side, but she says that I would have liked him.
That's nice. So then your mom is passing the memory down to you, even though you never got to meet him. You have one more? All right. And then is anybody else? All right, Millie, go ahead.
I really loved my grandma and papa's dog named Tidy. I was a little girl when he was alive. I loved to play with him really much, and I miss him.
Thank you. Oh, and Nina.
I bring a picture. Sorry. This was my grandma and my grandpa. My grandma loved baking, and my grandpa liked singing funny songs.
Thank you guys for sharing. So this is a way that we keep our ancestors or our beloved pets alive in our hearts. And that's one way that we can honor them. So thank you guys. And now, please join me in singing our children and youth to religious education classes.
Our congregation is beginning the celebration of our 75th anniversary. The small group of people who began to meet as the Unitarian Church of Northport grew to become the first Unitarian Fellowship of North Suffolk, and then became the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Huntington. These people have mostly died, but we are the heirs of their legacy. And yesterday we did a memorial service for Ralph, Pat, and Bob were some of the people who found this building and had the imagination of thinking this garage and castle could be turned into a congregation. These ancestors together created this sacred community, just like you are creating this congregation for the people who will come after you. Today, we will honor our members who have died since 2010. That's 60 people in all, plus the people who have died in the past year. So we're going to read their names in unison. There are 3 slides. You can skip the dates. We picked 2010 arbitrarily because it's because there are a lot of people. But I wanted to bring the ancestors who perhaps more of you would have known into this room with us today. So if you would read with me, James Lipke, Joan Halsey McQuaid, James T. Sorrentino, Ruth Auerbach, Jonathan Russell, Lydia Miller, Marjorie Rosero, Dove Thomas, Eve Wesliter, Paul J.D. King, Frank McQuaid, Bernard James Musso, Les Swan, Kim Chaskill DeLazio, Ray Forrest, Doris Kimina, Eric Rattinger, Linda Hayward, Mark Herman, John Kamina, Lou Kulias, Stella Russell, Marian Selweski, Mimi Kuth, Louise Seidel, Lois Ann Sapis, Peter Sapis, Reverend Paul Ratzlaff, Robert Wappinger, Meg Eckstein, Samantha Kulias, Millie Novak, Robert Bob Ralph, Richard Barbero, Jean Barron, Walter P. Chaskill, Esther Feldman, Patrick McGloin, Alice Richardson, Melvin Dean Schwartz, Shirley Steer, Eudice Ray Struber, Marilyn J. Kopp, Joan Lipke, Albert Nathan Rosen, Susan Lee Waldron, Mary Jane Washington, Donald R. Clark, Carolyn A. Lemke, Martin S. Lippitt, Christina Pisani, Robert. And this year, 11 members and children of members passed away. Their names have been added to our memorial wall. We will read their names aloud as Karen lights a candle for each one. And because we will not be doing joys and concerns this morning because of the length of the service, Karen will also light this one candle for all that you are holding in your heart. So if you would join me in saying these names and wait until Karen has lit a candle before we read the next one. Dorothy Burns, Natalie Freevert, Bill Hecker, Esme Willow Klatsky, John Link, Nick Nielsen, Pat Ralph, Ann Rattinger, Don Schmitz, Connie Wayne Schwartz, Meredith Steffen. And while we struggle with the votos, may I invite you now to speak the names of others who have passed away, either friends or family members of the fellowship or people in your own lives. As we think of these ancestors, may their memories bless us and inspire us. We're going to do a litany of remembrance. Your part is to say we remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, in the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of the summer, in the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, in the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joys we yearn to share. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us, and we remember them. When someone dies who is a UUFH member, their names are added to a memorial board in the back of the sanctuary. The first memorial board was designed by Bernard Musso, Ann Skolnick's late husband, and he was assisted in its creation by Brian Haywood, Dick Kopp, and John Scanello. Today, we are unveiling the second half of the memorial board. So if you want to, I'll just turn around and look for a minute. And I want to hold up and thank Bill Hawkins, our own Bill Hawkins, for creating it lovingly for us. And I invite you to take the time to look at those boards and read those names when you are in the sanctuary and remember them. May I also invite you to take a walk through our lovely memorial gardens and think about those who came before us. Their names and our memories bless us.
Our split plate recipient for October is the UUA Disaster Relief Fund. As many of you know, thousands of Floridians were adversely affected by Hurricane Ian. The building that holds our Fort Myers congregation sustained significant damage, and many of the UU Congregation of Venice members lost their homes. The UUA Disaster Relief Fund is there to help, but funds are of short supply. Imagine how devastating it would be for us to lose the walls of our treasured fellowship or our beloved home. I hope that you can be as generous as you are able. You can put your contribution into the basket that will be passed around, send a check to the office, or donate through the website as seen on the screen. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you to the choir and Dr. J for that moving piece. It reminds me a little bit of my Sarton's poem titled All Souls. The dead move through all of us, still glowing. As we sang in the opening hymn, we are our grandmother's prayers and our grandfather's dreaming. So I want to show you this slide. This photo is my ancestors on my father's side. Of the people in this picture, only my mother in the back row is still alive. I chose it to show you this photo of my paternal grandmother and my grandfather, who are on the far left and far right of the picture. My dad is in the back with my mother. My aunt and uncle are the younger couple in the front. My grandfather, Irving, snuck into the United States illegally on forged papers obtained at great risk by my great-grandmother, Pearl. The paper said he was coming to visit his three brothers, Willie, Harry, and Sam, who had emigrated earlier to the US, except they weren't his brothers. They were his second cousins, and he wasn't coming for a visit. He moved here permanently. Irving was what some people today call an illegal immigrant. Anna, on the left, met Irving in her early teenage years. Her mother, my great-grandmother, Deborah Hafner, who I was named after, sent Anna at 17 on a ship to New York. Anna knew no one in New York except those 4 20-something boys. Anna's 3 sisters all died on a forced transport to a concentration camp. I wish I knew more about my ancestors. I do know that their genes run through me. I don't think I can imagine how brave it must have been to leave their families, travel across the ocean in steerage to a place where they knew nobody. But I can imagine their fear. I can't imagine Irving and Anna's life in an East Side tenement, at one time living with 3 families in an apartment. But I can imagine how hard they must have worked to save the money to send my dad to Brooklyn College. I find it hard to imagine what it must have been like to be in the US in the 1930s and 40s, watching the European war against the Jews, knowing that their relatives were being slaughtered. But we do know what it's like, right? To watch disasters unfolding in the world right now and how helpless it can feel. You can turn that off, Deb. The study of epigenetics teaches us, quote, that family wounds are carried unconsciously from generation to generation. The stories and traumas of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers are our stories down into our very bodies. Epigenetics has been defined as ancestral trauma, but it's more than that. I know I carry my grandparents' fears deep in my cells, but I also believe I carry their courage. Surely my commitment to the poor, to immigrants, to all those who are othered by race or sex or gender or ethnicity, at least in part comes from their legacy of being their granddaughter. Irving died of a heart attack prematurely at the age of 51, and his unexpected death haunted my father, Saul Hafner. At the age of 45, believing he had only 6 more years to live, my father divorced my mother, wanting to try out a new kind of life. He retired from his first career in his mid-50s, determined to create a life where he didn't dread going to work on Monday mornings. He celebrated his 60th birthday with a surprise wedding ceremony. He was even more surprised to actually reach the age of 80. He liked this quote, "It's not that I'm afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens." He passed away in 2017 at age 87. That spring before that November when he died, he said to me, "You know, it really sucks. Nobody's going to say I died too young." Although, of course, for those of us who loved him, he did. No matter how old somebody we love is when they die, it's too soon, right? I confess to you today that I inherited my dad's fear of mortality. Even as a minister, I hate the idea that we are alive for such a short time, that one day we will be the ancestors, that one day your names will be on that wall. But I read something a few years ago that made me more comfortable with mortality. This is the question. Would you want to live forever? Would you want everyone who is alive now to live forever without death if no new person could be born? Would you? No, right? No. My answer was a swift no. See, we know new people must be born. The cycle of life is too important. The importance of generativity is too important. Our future is too important for us to wish for personal immortality. Nature has a wisdom beyond our knowing. This congregation has experienced so much loss. The loss of at least 71 people in the past 12 years. That's more than are sitting here right now. The loss of your beloved minister, Reverend Paul Ratzlaff, to declining health that made it impossible for him to keep serving you. The sudden loss of a full-time DRE. The losses we all experienced during COVID and the loss of our time together. Reverend Jude leaving. It is important that we take the time to honor those losses in your recent history and to recognize that you are still grieving them. And I will be planning some events for us to spend time on that. Poet Mary Oliver wrote, "To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your whole life depends on it. And when the time comes, to let it go. To let it go." Letting go is hard. Grief is hard. Remembering is essential. We need to remember what is good, and we also need to remember that many of our ancestors perpetrated systems of oppression. How many of you watch PBS's Finding Your Roots with Professor Henry Gates? Right? And so how often is it that white people with long-standing ties in the US find out that their ancestors owned other people, or that there were murderers or thieves among their ancestors? So may we also take the time to acknowledge and seek to right the white supremacists, the patriarchal, the xenophobic actions of those who came before us as well. Poet John Donahue wrote these words: "Decide carefully how you now live the life you would love to look back on your own deathbed." I'm gonna read that again. Decide carefully how you now can live the life you would love to look back on from your deathbed. For me, part of that looking back will be knowing that we actively work to heal the world. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to act because we stand in the shadows of our personal ancestors who did good and did wrong, as well as our social justice ancestors. How can we not today work for civil rights, voting rights, when we think about the lives of John Lewis, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Bayard Rustin, Malcolm X, Cesar Chavez, Mary McLeod Bethune? Or when we think about women's rights, Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, Betty Friedan, Shirley Chisholm, Bella Abzug. For LGBTQ rights, Harvey Milk, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha Johnson, Edie Windsor. And let us be inspired by our Unitarian and Universalist social justice forebearers, Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Clara Barton, Sophia Lyon Faz, Viola Liuzzo, Reverend James Reeb, Alondra Williams, Reverend Hopewood Johnson. How can we not rededicate ourselves to this fellowship when we think about those who died so that you could be here today, so that you could be in this very room today? That's where I think real immortality takes place, when we remember. When we remember those we loved, when we remember those who came before us, when we remember those who prepared the way for us. May we remember all those who blessed this fellowship and all who blessed our individual lives. May we be inspired by our ancestors. May we be worthy of their legacy. May we live lives that will inspire those who come after us. May it be so. And if you would join us and rise in body or spirit and sing with us, "Comfort Me." The choir will help lead us. The closing words this morning are from the Reverend Barbara Peskin. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Let us go remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love mightily, to bow to the mystery, to remember them always. My friends, may you go in peace. May our real service begin. Please join us in singing Amazing Grace. I invite you to stay seated and to let the melody and the voices wash over you. And just as a quick note, I would love, if I didn't get to greet you on the way in, for you to come and greet me at the door on your way out so that I have a chance to learn your names and get to know a little bit more of your stories each and every week. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us here today, everyone. For those in the fellowship, please come into the social hall for coffee and conversation. Have a wonderful day, everyone.